Good morning. Add myself to the stage here. It is Thursday. We're on the chat session. And is anybody out there? I'm going to go check the comments, see if anybody's checked in. Doesn't look like it. So today, I want to talk about what everybody else is talking about. And that's the death of Rob Reiner and his wife. And I think his wife's getting obviously left out of this. But we don't know anything about her other than I guess she was a photographer. And Michael is joining us. So I'm going to add him to the stage. And there he is, folks. The guru that taught George Harrison the sitar. And oh, wait a minute. No. I'm sorry. Michael Gavlak.
That's high praise. That's high praise.
My mistake. How you doing, sir?
Gonna take a crash course in sitar is what I'm gonna do.
There you go. And Eastern philosophy. So I wanted to bring you on today. Lucas is here. Morning, Lucas. And Chantel's here. Okay. Well, and Catherine, good morning. So, Michael, I wanted to, again, talk about the news that everybody else is talking about. And that is the people calling it a tragedy. I think it's more an outrage. I think it's more a horror. And I wanted to talk about a couple of things. Why don't you just give me your reaction, first of all?
Well, my first reaction is, I am with you on the misuse of that word tragedy, right? It's like, I'm sure, yes, it's tragic for somebody in the scenario, but when you look at the big picture, the whole thing, it's not a tragedy, it's an atrocity, right?
Yeah, there you go.
It's an atrocity. A tragedy is like, so we get wrapped up in our own personal feelings and emotions and fail to cast it in the proper light. It's like we're doing disservice to his memory, right? We're doing disservice to Rob and Michelle's memory by mislabeling it. Oh, it's a tragedy. It's like,
right.
Anyway, but I when it hit me, or when I heard about it, it hit me, and I have, when you have somebody who's been a part of your life, right? It's like Meathead has been a part of my life. I remember that was his break in, right? That was his, he got in, and I watched All in the Family as it was airing, because thank God my mom or my stepdad had it on the TV, and Archie Bunker, right? It was just iconic, and something about it was riveting, and Meathead was always it's a funny thing, he was typecast, right? He must have been typecast. Never changed his political philosophy. Was always a leftist liberal from being Meathead all the way up to the end. However, it's a case where artists and their political views do not always align. Like the art, being an artist, being gifted and talented is not, doesn't automatically mean you're going to love Jesus, the person who gave you all that art.
Right.
And I would kind of smile and smirk and shrug my shoulders when he'd go on his political rants, but that does not, there was not a streak of joy in my heart when I found this, right? It's the contrast with the Charlie Kirk moment. It's like these kinds of things really delineate the character of a person. And when I heard about it, it was shocking and grievous, not joyous. Yeah, there's another leftist gone off the map. We don't need to worry about him. Like, no, not at all. This is evil, right? We need to respond to evil accordingly. And it's just, so those are my initial emotions, and we have more to say, but
yeah, I was just talking about it with my wife this morning. She goes, wow, you're really interested in this. And I said, Rob Reiner was a big part of my childhood. On Saturday nights, I'm a little older than you. So from the beginning, I caught that show from the beginning. Must have been right about the time you were born, right? And the biggest thing in my dad's week was Archie. And
Archie.
8 o'clock on Saturday, everything stopped because Archie's on. Like that, it's called All in the Family. It's Archie. It's all about Archie, right?
Archie Bunker. Yeah.
And so that interchange between Meathead and Archie, right? That was my dad and my oldest brother. My oldest brother was a hippie. He got into drugs and everything in the 60s. And my earliest memories are my dad and my brother just going to war, and not being able to be in the same room. But Meathead's character, Michael, right, was the representation of the anti-establishment, and Archie was the establishment. And I think the show was invented by a guy named Norman Lear, a huge lefty. He did Maude, he did the Jeffersons. He was the big producer on television at the time. And this show was actually, Michael was him, and Archie was his dad. And he imagined that I'll do this show about my dad and me. I'll put this liberal, right, young, hip, with it, protester against this, stale, angry conservative working man, and that will champion my cause. And it completely was the opposite. And my dad loved Archie. To his dying day, my dad swore that Carroll O'Connor had to be a conservative. And Carroll O'Connor was a huge lefty, who, by the way, had his son die of drugs, right? 20 years ago.
Yeah.
His son was just like Rob Reiner's son. But producers made a huge mistake, because Michael was an insufferable liberal living rent-free in Archie's house. Archie, a World War II veteran who fought for this meathead's freedom, right? And went to the loading dock every day to put food on the table. And this fat hippie that's living with his daughter, he put up with because he loved his daughter, right? And so Archie became the sympathetic figure. And I think towards the end of the show, I know that there's some scenes out there that are going viral of Meathead, of Rob Reiner's character, at the end when they move out, thanking Archie for bringing him in and stuff like that. So, but it's interesting that dynamic between them, and really, I think Rob Reiner was playing himself on that show, because that was him.
Yeah, typecast. It was.
I always thought, and this is a theory of mine, but that was the thing that I think started to turn things around. There was a very significant factor in turning the country around. And 5 or 6 years after that show was over, we had this conservative resurgence. And I recently saw a ranking of the greatest characters of television of all time. And who do you think was number one?
No way.
Archie.
No way.
Archie was voted the number one character, and I mean, Carroll O'Connor played that part like the best acting job I've ever seen, because he was completely the opposite. But I think that had a huge impact on the country, thinking, okay, here we are every Saturday night, the biggest show on TV, and we're watching this dynamic between this young, dead from the neck up hippie and this hardworking, my wife and her sister can't stand Archie because of the way he treated women and stuff like that. Yeah, I understand that. Archie was hard-lived, but Archie was the guy who went to work every day and put his money on the table for that freeload, guy that was, sleeping with his daughter, whatever, however you want to put it. But but that's just my theory. So Rob Reiner is a very significant part of my childhood, and that's Rob Reiner dying is personal. As much as I didn't like his character, it was still part of my development, really. So,
yeah, and God, the artists just get used by God, right? They want to do their art, and they think their message will get across, and they can see it a certain way, but they can't see it fully, because it's part of being the artist is you're very myopic in how you see your art sometimes. And and God uses it and shocks the artist, and as Electric Dog talk about a backfire, says here in the comments, talk about a backfire. Your comment, your note about that show being credited with a wave of conservatism sweeping into the West, our country, that rings true and is further like evidence of something that I'm like the project I'm working on. Part of it, it's a suppressed story that hasn't been told, that needs to be told, and it needs to be told in the best possible way, on screen, long form TV show style. And it's a story that hasn't been told, that people, when they hear about it, are shocked. Well, in my research, come to find out, the Jewish Holocaust itself was fading from people's memories, and then a TV show came out, 4 episodes, in 1978, a TV show called Holocaust.
Oh, God,
and it had a dramatic impact in Western cultures, certainly in the United States. But I met a guy who lived in Germany at the time, where the events took place, and that movie came out, and Germany changed that week when that came out. He said it was so shocking in Germany that's when the resurgence and the understanding of the horrors of the Holocaust were entrenched, right? It firmly implanted in the conscience because of a TV show. So All in the Family, that makes sense. And that, let's put a racist as our main character, right? Thinking he's a racist, but it's the writer's room. They were just writing, some of them, I bet. I mean, I don't know. You have to do the research, but I bet there were few, God had a few people in there, writing some main themes, that would resonate and backfire on the intent of the creator. The art has a life of its own.
Right. Yeah. And also, aside from All in the Family, that's not the only impact Rob Reiner had on society. Talk about him as a storyteller.
One of my favorite movies of all time to this day. And I didn't know it when it came out, so
Let me guess.
No, hold on.
Okay. Oh, sorry,
not Spinal Tap, but
not Spinal Tap. Oh, you as a rock and roll guy, man. I figured.
Well, that's the first. I think probably in my memory, that's the first movie I saw that was Rob Reiner. I didn't know who directed it until much later.
I didn't either.
But another film that he made that was not a hit when it came out, but became a cult classic that I and my wife fell in love with, and then we had kids. It was one of their favorites, and to this day is one of my all-time favorite films. And I was actually shocked when I found out that it was Rob Reiner that directed it. Princess Bride.
Oh, yeah. You didn't know.
So I had no idea.
I think when you list his movies, I could, Princess Bride to me is my favorite fairy tale movie.
Yeah.
I mean, it's done so well. Stand By Me, which I didn't realize he did,
right,
was a great, adventure. And he did it with kids mostly, right? And then the big one that I did not know he did was Misery.
I just found that out too. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's amazing.
He did, the guy that did Princess Bride did Misery.
Yeah.
Paul, the little penguin, always faces northeast. Now I'm going to have to break your ankles with a sledgehammer.
That movie put her on the map. That right, Kathy Bates.
It did.
So brilliant in that.
Can you think of a better movie? I cannot think of a better movie performance. And it wasn't gore. It wasn't explosions. It was mental illness is really what it was.
Right.
And
it's just creepy.
Oh my, she's, I even have nightmares sometimes. My wife's saying, Joel, the toilet always goes back, lid always goes back down. Now here's my sledgehammer.
Put iron ankle braces on or something.
Exactly. So, but no, this, the range of storytelling, for a guy to do that, I did not fully appreciate him until now. But that, I was talking to my wife this morning. I told her, this is why whenever we want to watch a movie and you want to watch something new, we can't find anything because they're if there was a golden age, one of the golden ages of movie making, I think it was the late 80s, early 90s. And Rob Reiner had a big part of that. But I want you to talk about the power of a story, of storytelling. Give me
Well,
your take
actually,
on that and
you make
how he did that maybe.
you make a good point about an era, because things change. There's all kinds of factors that will change an industry and a culture. And there was this moment, and I don't know if it was the 90s or soon thereafter, or maybe 2005 or so. There was a point in the Academy Awards when the winners, the nominees and the winners shifted from it was used to be the big blockbuster movies that everybody went to and saw and that made a bunch of money and were these grand stories, to then it shifted to these agenda
Right.
films, right? So the aging out of a certain generation of the academy, the people that vote in the academy, and then the rise of people with other agenda. Kind of like when you went to school, you had these nasty kids in school that were leftists, and then they ended up becoming the educators and the politicians, right?
Yes.
All the crazy ideas, the radical ideas, they end up getting the jobs and taking over, and then they used to rail against the establishment, and then they become the establishment, and you see that it's like they've become what they hated, and that's what's happened in the, like, I stopped watching the Academy Awards. I was like, nah. It's like they're just I was going to use a very kind of gross phrase, but they're kind of all it's this small group that just are patting each other on the back
Yeah,
and
I can
promoting
think
each
of
other.
the, I think I could know the term you're
The
thinking of.
circle, yeah, that one,
Yeah.
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 So
So
um so institutions have that. Like an institution will start out, it'll have its purpose, its telos, if you will. An institution is established for a reason, and then they tend to ossify and move in a different
yeah.
direction and become a shadow of their former selves. Storytelling, however, is storytelling is storytelling is storytelling, and you can't hide good stories. The art itself makes itself known, and one of my proofs of concept, for case in point, is Mel Gibson did not go the Hollywood route with The Passion of the Christ, right? They wouldn't fund it, they wouldn't back him, they wouldn't whatever. And he's like, well, I think this story needs to be told, and it needs to be told this way. In fact, let me give a personal connection to that. When I got saved in 1988, and as a young Christian, but also even then wanting to work in the industry and tell stories, when I meditated on the gospel, on the story of Jesus Christ, I even said, I may have said it out loud to some of my friends. I said, if I was going to tell the story of Jesus, the whole thing would be the last few hours of his life, right? I would just focus in on the crucifixion, because that's the most dramatic. And I said it would have to be rated R, because you'd have to do it accurately, right?
Yeah.
Your average Christian movie maker is going to sanitize everything because, well, we don't offend. It's too much for the people in
Yeah.
the pews. Blah blah blah. They won't even use profanity in their movies because we can't cross those lines. It's like, okay, you're not being real, and if you're not being real, you're lying to people, right? So
Yeah.
back then, when I first had that thought, I'm like, I would do the Life of Christ. That's the movie I would make. 13 years later, The Passion of the Christ comes out. It's exactly what happened, and when he did exactly what I would have done. And then I heard an interview with him, and he said, I've been working on this movie for 13 years. And I'm like, so he had the idea to do it when I got saved. And I thought, right. So there's
Yeah.
so there's a storytelling is in the heart of God, right? He
Yeah.
designed storytelling. He designed the hero's journey, right? Like all
Yeah.
Joseph Campbell is this big, philosopher who a lot of artists model their writing and their storytelling after, but he was a pagan and atheist or something like that. But the hero's journey is the Christ type, right? Christ is the
Yeah.
antitype, and everything else is a type of him. And so God designed storytelling not just to entertain, but to convey truth. And that's the problem Hollywood is in right now. They don't know what truth is. They can't define truth. They're just trying to follow a formula. That's why you don't see a lot of new original stuff coming out. You're like, let's piggyback off of off of the market or the audience that this movie had. Let's do the sequel or let's do the remake, right? You see
Right.
more and more of that every day because it's the risk averse investors in Hollywood. But
Yeah.
God designed storytelling for a reason, and it's to tell the Christ story, whether it's in another hero's journey. They are all mirrors of Christ. The hero's
Right.
journey is the Christ story. You can't get away from it.
Yeah. No, I agree. I have, like you, I haven't watched an Academy Award in, I don't even, it may be 30, 40 years.
I worked in the business. I worked on Academy Award night. So the only Academy Awards I would watch would be the little segment I was cutting, and then I would send it out and ignore the rest of it.
Oh yeah. No, they have lost their way, but all the good stories have that same, it has to be based in some kind of truth that speaks to that void, that created in the image of God void we have. And it's funny, even someone like, Rob Reiner really reached his stride in his career when he stopped being himself, his self-absorption. And then he started telling, I think he, for by all accounts, he's a good guy, a very good man. Guys like, was it, not James Brooks, but somebody else, a very conservative guy in Hollywood. I can't think of his name right now. He was like, I'm very conservative and people can't believe I'm friends with Rob Reiner. I think, and he said, no, then you don't know anything. You don't know Rob Reiner. He was, we disagreed strongly, and yet, he was good to me. He was a good friend. His reaction to Charlie Kirk murder was spot on, so, but he's a very rare person in that world, and that where he could step out of that and see the humanity in the other person. And that one of the things that the liberal mind and the progressive mind, and really the Marxist mind is if you disagree with me, you are a bad person, if a person at all, and that's how, all the atrocities of communism and Marxism were able to take place. You dehumanize the other, right?
Right.
He didn't do that. And when he could step out of his message, his political stance, and he was, one of the things that really bothers me is people that were of the same political mind with him can't pay tribute to him without saying, oh yeah, and he was a political ally. He was on our side. And I'm like, God, you can't even let go of that now. It didn't matter.
Yeah.
It didn't, but anyways, that's, to me, was him as a storyteller. He was able to step out of himself and recognize a good story, recognize good actors. I think Rob Schneider, who's a conservative comedian, said Rob Reiner loved a good actor or a good comedian, and he didn't care what your politics was because you were good for the story, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that he was a rare breed. As much as, his character and all the family, to me, is still a villain.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then his movies made him a hero. I mean, he did movies the right way. He really did.
I was with a group of guys last night that, and one of them is an actor, and he told the story that he was cast by Rob Reiner in, a bit part. I forget which movie it was. He did one, not JFK. That was somebody else, but he did LBJ. Rob Reiner did a movie called LBJ.
Really?
I guess he was one of the producers or something. And this guy would, it was kind of a high point in this guy's career because he had to play this friend of mine, new friend of mine, mentioned that he had to play a Boston accent, and he's like, I'm from LA, right? And he's like, so he found an actor and a show of a guy doing Boston that I'm just going to imitate that guy the way he's doing it. And he went to the audition, and Rob Reiner and the other producers are sitting there, and he's auditioning, and he does the full-on accent. And Rob, after the audition, he says, what part of South are you from? What part of South are you from? Or whatever the term is, like
South Boston, yeah, South.
Right?
Yeah.
And it was the highest praise. He goes, I'm not, I'm from out here. And Rob was flummoxed, right? It's like, that's a high compliment, right? To have
Yeah.
somebody of Rob's caliber and talent to be convinced by your performance, right? So
Right.
it was one of those, and then the guy got the part and everything. So it touches, people have impacts, and their impacts are far reaching. And I just also want to keep in mind, I doesn't seem like he had any faith or anything like that, but it does not exclude people who disagree with you. It does not exclude them from actual faith, right? Like you're saying, he's a good guy, and I mean, he was, people liked him from
Right.
across the spectrum, right? And that's kind of a opposition you want to be and want to have. The phrase goes that to Republic, to conservatives, liberals are just wrong. To liberals, conservatives are evil, right?
Right.
It's how you view the opposition, and people, and so thinking that half of the country is evil drives people mad. But some liberals don't fall for that. They
Yeah.
recognize, they also think we're mistaken, right? So
Right.
keep that in mind, people. When you have family and friends, maybe they don't think you're evil. Maybe you can get along with them.
Yeah. If there's maybe on some holiday coming up, I don't know. Yeah.
Right, right.
Could be. Um, I don't know how much time you have, but I wanted to, if you
I
have
got time.
time,
Yeah.
you got time? Because I've been listening to a lot of, talking about his son, his relationship with his son. And I don't know how much you've had contact with things like drug addiction or mental illness, but this seems to be like a case study in just that. And you're a Hollywood guy. Do you know people that are going through things like this? Is this something that you had friends, or um, because this seems to be the underlying story in all this, is that Nick Reiner was your basic typical, if there is a typical Hollywood child, just, so many stories like this. Like I said, Carol O'Connor's son went through the same thing and died from it. Continual relapses. And I just have a memory of Carol O'Connor on a press conference yelling at, he knew the drug dealer that gave his son that, he goes, "You dirty rat, you gave my son." And I'm like, do you see yourself in this at all, Carol? Because by all accounts, Rob Reiner was trying, and his wife were trying everything they could to get him help. And eventually they kind of got caught up in his addictions and his manipulation and his lying, and it didn't end well.
Well, from what I just have I didn't read a bunch, didn't watch a bunch. Here's what I know. They were at a party, a Christmas party at Conan O'Brien's house the day before. I heard a little bit it was on the news or something as I was walking out, that it was just not that Nick is the son's name, was
Nick, yeah.
not not comporting himself properly in that kind of company. And I guess he was talking to Bill Hader, and asking him, "Are you famous? Are you famous?" And then the personal conflict, broke out in between Rob and his son at the party. It kind of started there. I don't know any more details than that. I just caught pieces of it. And so I reflect on, Hollywood celebrities, or Hollywood, I would call Rob Reiner an A-lister, right? He's every person on the planet pretty much knows one of the movies that he's made, probably. And maybe
Right.
not everybody on the planet, but to have that kind of impact, you have an outsized influence, and then a child growing up in that environment. We can't understand, most people can't understand growing up in a house, like that. But you, by virtue of your lot in life, have access that unfettered access to just about anything, right?
Right.
Your dad is who he is, and it gives you a bit of swagger. And if you don't have the guidance of the Spirit, right, the Holy Spirit telling you right from wrong. I mean, we all know right from wrong, but without a structure in place that reinforces that, and that reinforces listening to the Holy Spirit, as opposed to ignoring it and going,
Yeah.
according to the flesh, right? We're just reading through Romans, and it's like, who can separate me from this body of death? Well, if you don't have the spirit and a spiritual influence in your life, you're going to listen to the body of death, and it's
Right.
going to lead to death, right? It's going to lead you to decisions that ruin your whole life and the lives of those around you. And that's sadly, I mean, you probably know a few more details, maybe if you read more, but I just know what I shared.
Yeah, basically that. Like I said, for a guy in and out of rehab so many times, I do think it's interesting the contrast, because Rob Reiner himself, his dad was a Hollywood A-lister,
Yep.
Carl Reiner, right?
Carl Reiner.
Yeah, and so he had the same privileges, I guess, but even though he got into the hippie stuff, and I'm sure he got into drugs that went with it, but he didn't go full spiral, and he used that privilege to be creative and contribute. It's funny. I grew up across town from you, where you are. I grew up in the Palos Verdes area of LA. And do you remember the movie The Falcon and the Snowman?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Timothy Hutton and Sean Penn, right? That story took place with the characters, Dalton Lee and Chris. I'm losing, but anyways, Timothy Hutton's character actually went to my high school and graduated from my high school. And that movie, actually, was based on a book. And I saw the movie. I'm one of those guys that I have to see the movie first before I read the book, because otherwise, the movie to me is just a complete disappointment. Right?
Oh, right. Oh, right.
So in that book, so I read the book recently within the last 5 years, and there was a part of it I had to show to my wife, and it talked about the hill, which is what we called the peninsula. If you know the Palos Verdes Peninsula in LA, it's a peninsula that sticks out, and it's just a big hill. And there's two sides to the hill. There's the rolling hill side and the Palos Verdes side. I grew up on the inland, east-facing side of it, and Christopher Boyce was his name. He was a spy, one of who in the 70s was busted. He worked at TRW, which was the big thing, and he was selling secrets to the Russian. And Dalton Lee, Sean Penn's character, was a drug dealer that was his best friend, and they got caught up in this, and they got caught, and it was a huge story back in the 70s. But they described the atmosphere in this. I was more upper middle class, but on the other side of the hill was upper class. I mean, that was just like, and the amount of drugs that I grew up around in the 70s was from grade school. We had friends of mine were getting high, and the way that the author of that book described an upper middle class or upper class existence was something everyone should read, because for people who gain the whole world but lose their soul, is exactly what it's like. And we had dances canceled. We had football games. People had to be, checked at the gate. All kinds of things, because drugs were so prevalent, and the actions of these two characters were so involved with drugs themselves that it just hollowed out the area I grew up in, especially the other side of the hill, the Palos Verdes, where there was nothing to do. There were no movie theaters. There were no bowling. It was one of these areas where the houses are set back on these really long driveways where you don't know your neighbor. My side, we actually knew our neighbors. That kind of saved my little part of it. But it's this idea that I have so much, and I'm going to live in this high castle, and and I have everything now. If you lived on the ocean side of the hill, you had everything. But the children of those parents that I grew up around had zero. Their lives were empty, and they filled that void and that boredom and that emptiness with drugs. And it was called the Pill Hill, because that was, and I grew up around so much drug, and by the grace of God, I managed to be apart from it, because I was tied into a solid church and my parents paid attention. But that kind of thing really resonates with me too on this story, because he was a child of privilege. They live in Brentwood, right? And, for all Rob Reiner's liberal, posturing about, the 1% or whatever it was, right? He wasn't giving away any of his money, right? He wasn't letting homeless people stay in his mansion. Um, you know,
He had borders around his property, you mean?
yeah, he had a big wall and a big fence, right? So, this is why it really resonates with
Let's
me. And
not besmirch the dead. Just kidding.
I know, no, that's not to say, but that's just anything against him. It's against his philosophy,
Right.
And he was not able to see the, wait a minute, this is one thing you preach, but look how you live.
It's a blindness to his own hypocrisy.
Yeah. So socialism for thee, not for me. Right. So, but anyway, so that's one reason this really resonates with me, because that's a model I grew up with, and that's a reality that I know all too well. And, but I don't know what the answer to that is. I really don't. Other than, like I said, you have to, obviously I know what the answer is, but the world has no answer for that.
Well, I think, not to get too in depth, I do have to jump out here soon.
But I knew you didn't have this much time.
But I do have this time for this storytelling. Back to that, the Passion of the Christ changed something in our culture, right? It demonstrated that there's a hunger for that type of content. And it's further demonstrated by the success of The Chosen, right? The long form storytelling of the gospel. And that is also kind of its own unique animal, where they didn't even need Hollywood. They produced it themselves. They created their own distribution platform, right? They created their own mechanism, an app for distributing it. And the audience came, and then Hollywood took notice and then started throwing money at it. And then more recently than that was a couple summers ago, The Sound of Freedom, a completely independently produced film, way like medium budget, 25 million roughly it was the budget, and that's kind of a medium budget, but that ended up grossing more than 10 times the budget, right? And it's the subject matter. Hollywood, again, has been taken over by people with agendas, but now with technological advancement and things becoming cheaper and easier to do, and carrying a high-tech 4K camera in your hand, the art can't be contained into one little institution. And the stories that are life transforming and culture transforming, because you mentioned that, I didn't know that about All in the Family, and I thank you for that it had an impact and is credited with a wave of family values and conservatism that actually impacted, probably led to Ronald Reagan becoming president or something like that, right? And so it's in the storytelling, and I think especially with the administration we have now, the changes that are happening that we don't see in the administration, some of the cleansing of the corruption. It's not just in our government, it's happening across the board. Technology, I can now say things here on YouTube that I couldn't say 4 years ago, 2 years ago, right? We're moving in the right direction, and it's a gradual shift, but it's a shift nonetheless. And I think the storytelling is going to clean up. You're going to start seeing better stories, and the garbage that they've been making is already collapsing. It's collapsing major companies, Disney and Marvel, right? Marvel is Disney, but all of the stuff that they've been trying to force feed is losing money. And it's the independent productions, and when the big storytellers tell the right stories, like Maverick, right? Maverick was no politics at all. It was just heroic storytelling, America, pro technology in America, and justice, right?
Right.
That, I think we're going in the right direction. It'll be gradual, but I think it's going to solve a bunch of the problems.
Yeah.
And with TikTok, being out of the hands of China or something, right? TikTok, some of these apps, like Elon Musk buying Twitter and converting it to X, was a seminal moment. I think we'll see more things like that, right? As the advancements in technology and how people receive their entertainment and the content, I think you're going to see more of even the established ones changing. I believe. I think I've heard that Facebook has had a major turnabout from suppression of a lot of stuff. So future is bright. Let's just say that.
Well, from your lips to God's ears.
Amen. Amen.
That's if AI doesn't take over and kill us all first. So,
Well, that's for the next episode, right?
No, that's my regular thing. About once a month,
Okay.
I said, how much closer are we to what will Judgment Day from? But yeah, no, that's again, that's why we're doing what we're doing. It is a whole new ball game. And I started this about 10, 12 years ago, probably 13 years ago. I had a little studio. You were there, and someone said, you should get into podcasting. And I was like, what's podcasting? Podcast, well, just online audio files, on demand radio, let's say. Oh yeah, let's do that. That's cool. Called a bunch of pastor friends of mine. Some, a couple comedians came on board. And we were doing audio. And said, oh, you got to do video. You have to have video. And here we are 13 years later. And this is how everybody gets their information now. It's how I get my information. Mostly, there are some sources you can read, but if you want to know what's going on, you better be online and you better be part of this new media. And so here we are.
Here we are.
13 years later. I did not sign up for this, but here I am. This is not what I signed up for. I signed up for just little audio files, but now people turn to people like you and me. What people want now is someone looking them directly in the eye, like I am now, and telling the truth. No filters, no giant media corporations to tell you what content you need. No Walter Cronkite having a monopoly on news, nothing like that anymore. This is where it's at. So
unscripted, unvarnished sincerity, right? People respond to truth.
Yeah. And that's why they like movies like Sound of Freedom and Passion of the Christ.
Yep.
Because they instinctively, they know that this is what really is going on. And this is what Hollywood won't tell us. Whatever Hollywood won't tell you is what you need to know.
Yeah.
So, all right, my man. Well, thank you for the extra 23 minutes now of your busy day.
No worries.
All right.
Good to see you, my friend. Love you.
You too. Love you too. And everybody, thanks for listening. I will be on with Ben tomorrow, and we will see you then.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.